Hello to everyone who's tuning in. I really appreciate it. Please make sure that you say hello on your way in, and make sure that you hit the like button. If you're going to watch this on the rewind, make sure you hit the like button. And I want to say hello to my special guest for the evening, Bill Eddy. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be on.
Absolutely. If you would take a moment, if you would introduce yourself to us, tell us who you are, who you're going to be.
Okay. Well, basically, I'm Mr. Bill Eddy. I started out as a therapist doing child, family, couples counseling for about 12 years, but I liked conflict resolution and decided that I liked mediation and wanted to do where I can mediate disputes, especially divorce, help people stay out of court. But I went to law school so I could become a mediator and decided to practice law for a couple of years in family court, which turned into 15 years. After that, I've done about 15 years purely divorce mediation. But this led me to focus on high conflict disputes and high conflict personalities. So since 2008, I co-founded the High Conflict Institute, and we've been teaching about high conflict individuals, family, workplace, community, everywhere, and tools to help people manage these disputes. So that's kind of who I am.
Very good. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for the introduction. And that's definitely a lot of work there. Lawyering's got to be a high conflict in and of itself, right? Law school, right? So I came across you. I'm going to put it on the screen here. So I came across your work here. Which one is it? It's this one. I came across your work here. I think it's this one. Jesus, marriage is a bad deal. Bad deal. I think it's this one. Nope, that's the wrong one.
There it is.
No. That was the wrong person there.
Oh,
there's two people that wrote the same exact title in and I shouldn't have put that one on there, but I think this one is you. Yeah. So I came across this in Psychology Today. Is marriage good or bad for women? A popular book suggests marriage is unwise, but research indicates otherwise. And this was posted last year. And then as I'm scrolling around on Psychology Today, I found out, you do some anti-bullying work. So I definitely want to get into that because
here I am.
Yeah, because the ladies there in my chat there, they bully me a lot, so I want to talk to them about that. All right, so I like to say hello to some people. Hello to Sweet Tea. Hello to Yoli. Hello to Deborah Hutchinson. And Yoli says that's a lot of years, sir. I guess a lot of years of service there. So to anyone who's watching this, there is a poll. Some of you have already commented on it. There is a poll, and it says who benefits more from marriage, men, women, or to equal benefit. Right now, men and equal benefit are tied at 43. So anyone who's coming in here, make sure you hit the chat there. And then Garrett says there's no way men benefit more than women in marriage. Absolutely crazy. So I'd like to get your opinion. Why did you write the piece that I discovered you in all that? What made you decide to write the piece?
Well, my work most of the last 20 almost 30 years has been primarily families and divorce. As a family lawyer in family court after being a therapist, and then mediating divorces and educating people about high conflict divorces. And I felt, I read an article that came out, a woman basically saying, I got divorced and now my life can begin and marriage is terrible and basically that. And I was thinking, I've helped probably 2,000 people get divorced in court and out of court. And that's not what I see. What I see is it depends on the person, on the individual, and that there's a lot of women who are happily married and a lot of men who are happily married, as well as single women who are happy being single and single men happy being single. So I figured I'd look at the research, and the research actually surprised me. It's coming out, and I just double checked. So this was research came out of a big study in 2022 saying 40% of married women with children were very happy. So they have four categories: very happy, happy, unhappy, very unhappy. And so 40% were very happy, of married women with children. 25% of married women who didn't have children were very happy. 22% of unmarried women without children were very happy, and 17% of unmarried women with children were very happy. So the very happy category really came out solidly for women being married, and also for men. Said 35% of married men were very happy, 30% of married men without children. So the first 35 is with children. 30% married men without children, very happy. 14% of unmarried men without children, very happy. 12% of unmarried men with children, very happy. So it's pretty similar, but it comes out loud and clear for both men and women that being married is happier by and large. But again, it depends on the individual. And that's my experience as a divorce lawyer, therapist, and mediator. There are some individuals that people are much happier not to be married to. So I want to give to that also.
Mm, mm. Where can we find those numbers at?
They came from a general social survey, GSS. If you Google General Social Survey marriage 2024, it'll give you these numbers. They're from 2022, but the numbers haven't changed.
Mm, okay.
This
Going
is
to,
also, I might mention, based out of the University of Chicago. So it's a academic research, very legitimate, widely looked at and regarded.
what was this? What was the sample size? If you know, I'm not trying to trick you or anything. Do you know?
That's a really good question, and I don't know the answer to that.
Mm. All right,
But
don't
I
worry
know
about it.
Stan-
We can all go over there and read it for ourselves. So,
yeah.
so looking at you in your time doing this type of work, did you see how did you feel doing it? Were you depressed at all seeing all these different divorces? That's got to play in your own psychology, right?
No, because and people ask, how do I do this with this kind of work? I've got a lot of friends. I'm happily married, I might say. And I get outdoors a lot, go hiking, cross country skiing, depends on the season. And like as a divorce mediator for basically the last 15 years of my practice, 2/3 of my cases weren't high conflict. People didn't hate each other. Only maybe a third were they really angry and stayed angry. So I felt like I was helping people peacefully divorce who grown apart, met somebody else, all of that, and weren't in a lot of conflict and weren't against marriage, just that we weren't a good fit, is most of what they said. And this is mediation, which is people willing to sit down around a table together and not fight in court. I did the fighting in court stuff for 15 years. And one of the biggest differences I found is when parents fight in court over their kids, it's really hard to communicate after it's all over. Whereas in mediation, when people make decisions about their kids, they can still communicate and basically get along enough to do okay after a divorce. So that was the big difference.
Uh, but again, so you're dealing with people who are in mediation who want to go to mediation. Is there stats on that as far as how many people who are going through the divorce want to go through mediation versus the high conflict type of thing?
Well, let me just say, in general, most of the research I've looked at over the last 30 years considers about 20 to 25% of divorces as high conflict, like 2 or more years, people stay angry at each other. About 50% are low conflict, they get along generally, don't necessarily interact a lot, but they're okay supporting each other as parents. And about 20 to 25% of couples have what they call the good divorce, which is they're buddies. They have Thanksgiving together. Some may go on trips together with their ex and their new families and stuff like that. So I think those statistics are revealing to me. In terms of going through the divorce process, probably about 20% of people use the courts, at least for some decisions, but about 80% do their divorces out of court, either negotiating with lawyers, negotiating themselves, or going to mediation. What percent of that is mediation? I don't know. I haven't seen numbers, but it's significant. And with parenting issues, at least in California where I am, the courts require people to try mediation first for parenting issues before they can argue about it in front of a judge. So in that case, 100% of parenting disputes go to mediation first.
Okay, very good. Very good. Thank you for that. Garrett is asking a question here. He'd be interested to know if those same people would get married again if it was decades ago under today's current marriage laws.
The people that I dealt with as a therapist, as a lawyer, and as a mediator who were getting divorced, the majority of them then went on to get married again. And I think that's very interesting. Now, the divorce rate for first marriages right now is somewhere around 40-45% of marriages. Second marriages, that's a higher rate, maybe around 60%. Third marriages, maybe 70% divorce rate. But people seem to like being married. And if they don't think this is the right partner, they still try it again with someone else. And now you're talking about decades ago. Let me mention today we're seeing more of what they call gray divorce, people 50 and over. And those folks may have been married for 30 years. And so, yeah, they tend to want to date again and marry again in the future. So the strong impression I get is people like the idea of marriage. It's just finding the right person.
Very good. What do you what do you attribute to these gray divorces? Do you look at that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think part of it is people are living longer. And so, after 30, 40 years, they realize, kind of grown tired of this relationship, but I'm not that old yet. I did one couple. The husband was 73, the wife was 69, and they'd been retired, and they were friendly in their divorce because they knew they weren't a good fit anymore. And I would run into them in the community over the years after that and see them dating other people, and they both were quite happy. So sometimes the years people realize, okay, it's been enough, but they can still be peaceful. They share their kids, they share their grandkids. I'd say gray divorces tend to be not as many of them are high conflict. Um, but I think age and longevity, also our culture is more accepting of divorce and marriage, remarriage, than say 50 years ago.
Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, or
It's mixed. Sometimes I see people that I think, you should try a little harder. Things aren't that bad. And the grass isn't necessarily a lot greener on the other side. So you need to know what, what the problems are. I encourage people to get counseling if they're thinking, will the marriage work or not? Get couples counseling, get individual counseling, and see. I think there's a little bit, but not a lot of, well, this isn't working. I'm out of here. And I think we need to learn to be a little more patient with each other and learn skills. There's a lot of good couples counseling. There's good skills, weekends and programs that help save a lot of marriages because people just don't know how to make a marriage work. When they learn how to do that, then things often go much better. So yeah, I don't know that it's better or worse. It's just what's there.
yeah, that's all interesting. What do you think are the benefits of marriage today?
Oh,
Today, let me put it in more context here. Let me put it in more context. Uh, 50 years ago, a lot of ladies weren't working to certainly to the extent that they are today. Ladies have, in my vernacular, bossed up, right? They're becoming CEOs and getting more degrees, et cetera, et cetera. Now, in some places, they're out earning men. What is the benefit of marriage today?
I think in many ways, because people can have an income on their own, they can have friends on their own, they can have an apartment, a condo, a house on their own. With the internet, you can have sex on your own. The argument for marriage, I think, is that fundamentally we're happier as human beings when we have a partner, someone we can share our emotions with, our ideas with, our dinners with, time together. That I think that's why people like that. Is it's kind of how human beings are built. That we're really built to have partners and families and to get positive energy from each other. So I think the emotional connection of marriage is today probably the strongest appeal of it. But also, especially raising kids, it's easier with a partner, especially if you're on the same page. And I think you're talking about comparing it to 50 years ago, that men are more actively involved in child rearing than 50 years ago. And also, to some extent, other household chores. It's still not equal, but this is what's appealing to people is someone you can share all this stuff with.
I'm hearing that that non-equal household chores is really a big sticking point for women because they're working. They want the men to pitch in more. But I also hear that when the guys do try to do things, they're not as good at it. So the woman's like, okay, let me just do it. Right? It's kind of a double-edged sword there, right?
Right. There's a lot of negotiation around that early on in a lot of marriages today, I think, because it's not real clear cut. For some people, it's simple. If one person really loves to cook and the other's a terrible cook, that's not necessarily a hard decision. And I know men who are wonderful cooks and women who are happy to defer to them, even though majority of the good cooks are women. Um, so it's part of the negotiation. If people are aiming for a fairly equal relationship, I think they work those things out. They find, I'm much better at cleaning up than I am at cooking, and so I do the cleanup, and my wife does most of the cooking. Um, the laundry, I do the laundry and she does the shopping, and, figuring out what we can each contribute. A lot of traditional stuff. Men do, a lot of the repairs and yard work and all of that. I think the main thing is that there's good communication, and maybe that comes back to what do I think really what's the appeal of marriage is if you have good communication, you can really do so much more than you can alone.
Mm. What are the common themes that you've seen in it? Is it infidelity and divorce? Infidelity, the lack of household chore sharing. What's the common theme you see?
It's interesting. For at the beginning, when I really started working with this, like 30 some years ago, there was gender expectations, religion, um, extended family liking or disliking the partner. But I would say over the last 10, 15 years, the biggest factor has been how people approach money. And that there's dispute. One person spends money, one person saves money. Um, Credit cards are often a dispute, especially in divorce. And there's 10 of the United States are community property states. So any debts you incur during the marriage, pretty much 50-50. And one person's spending away and the other person's saving, they get pretty irritated at like, now I got to pay half of those expenses. So that comes up even in divorce mediation. I get people saying they're going to agree differently on that from the standard, and you can by agreement. And so anyway, I'd say money's the biggest issue. Infidelity to some extent, differences about kids, having kids or not. Some people, their messages about that are fuzzy when they get married, and then they realize one of us really does and one really doesn't want to have kids. And that's becoming a bigger issue with millennials and upcoming Gen Z is having fewer kids. Um, yeah, so a variety of things. One other big thing may be occupations where they take each other out of the city. Someone gets a job that's not like I remember a case I had. Someone was on a faculty and they got a big promotion to teach at another university halfway across country. And it's like if I'm going to do that and your job you're happy with here, um, don't hold me back, but I don't want to go there. And things were shaky anyway. So I've seen some disputes, couples split up over those kind of career differences and moves.
You guys make sure you hit the like button. If you have any questions, make sure that you text them to us or chat them to us. Would you encourage civil unions or cohabitation or marriage? Which one would you encourage based on your years of experience and what you've seen?
Well, it depends on what the goal is. Like for marriage, people, first of all, I co authored a book called Dating Radar. And in Dating Radar, we said don't make any big commitments for at least a year while you get to know the person. In other words, don't have a child together, don't get married for at least a year, don't have a child together, don't buy a house together for at least a year. But people say, what about living together? And frankly, that's okay as long as we haven't made this huge commitment yet. And so you see what it's like sharing space with somebody. So I would say, cohabiting maybe during 6 months or a year with the goal of getting married. The reality is, married couples are happier and more stable than unmarried couples. Even if the unmarried couples together for a long time, they still tend to split up sooner. And if they have kids together, they tend to split up sooner than married couples. So, of the choices, I would say marriage seems to be the most appealing.
I don't have any questions yet. Yoli says marriage is the way to go. Um, Religious couples versus secular couples, same divorce rates. How does that work out?
I would probably say not as high divorce rates with religious couples than secular couples, because and it's mixed because there may be religious pressure to stay together even though it's not working, whereas a secular couple might say, okay, we've got to go. But also, there's the religious practices and community may hold people together and help them feel a little bit more in common. So I might say slight difference with that, but I've also seen religious couples that would have preferred to split up 10 years earlier, but the social pressure kept them together of their extended family and community and preachers, etc. So I don't think it's worth forcing people to stay together if it's really not working.
Uh, I'm sorry. I Fire Small did ask a question. My apologies. I get yelled at here. How could a marriage after 45 years grow apart? Does marriage have an expiration date? How does it? How did, in your opinion, in your years of doing this, after 45 years? I mean, how does that happen? They just sick of each other, or
Well, it's interesting because it's a newer phenomenon from my experience. So if I look back, I've been a therapist since 1980. So if I look back 45 years, a lot of my work has related to divorce. That wasn't happening earlier on, but the last, maybe 10, 15 years, we're seeing more of that. I think part of it is people are thinking younger that, hey, I'm 60, I've still got a life ahead of me, and this isn't working that well. I might have put up with this if I expected to die when I was 65, but now I might live to 80 or so, and I want to date again and I want to meet people and have some fun still. So I think people's expectation of living a younger life in older years has certainly grown. And you see that, both men and women in the movies having romances at, 60, 70. You hear about people getting married in the retirement home at 90. Uh, so part of it is people's open mindedness to new relationships and also expecting more happiness in their lives, that there's, suffering and struggling in itself isn't usually the goal, but people have had to financially stay together, had more children and more grandchildren. Now that families are smaller, in some ways it's easier for people to go separate ways. So I wouldn't say it's that they necessarily grow tired of each other because there's a lot of couples that stay together and are happily married for 60 years. Um, so there isn't an expiration date, but some relationships may, I don't know, have an expiration date or just eventually stop working. And some people really do drift apart. They're not angry, they don't hate each other, but they don't have a connection much anymore.
would you support expiration dates on divorce decrees? Would you would you go for that 20 years and got to renew it just like a driver's license? Would you support that?
Well, it's an interesting concept. I remember years ago someone proposed, they said there should be a 5 year marriage should be a 5 year contract, and every 5 years you renew it or it expires. Um, uh, I don't know. I don't think we need that kind of pressure, but I think the reality is that people just start knowing things aren't working, and the question is, do we work on the marriage or do we work on getting divorced, going separate ways? But I wouldn't want an automatic renewal requirement.
I got you. Um, you ever see people who've gotten divorced and then seriously regret it, whether it's gray divorces or early divorces?
I've seen people regret it. One thing that happens, and sometimes it's an affair, is somebody will have an affair and realize, hey, this is more fun than my marriage. And so they'll initiate a divorce. And then the person they're having the affair with, who they thought was going to be their new partner, said, wait a minute, now that you're single, I don't want anything to do with you. And it doesn't work out, and they kind of want to come back. And depending on how awful the marriage was and how awful the divorce was, I've had couples remarry, or decide after they file to not get divorced after going through mediation, going through couples counseling, things like that. So I think there's probably a small percentage of that. Um, and it's good for people to think about that, be really sure this is what you want to do, because it may be hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube if you get divorced.
Mm, mm. Many men fear divorce because of the financial risks, what happens to them in family court. Now, do you agree that family court is biased against men? Would you agree with that statement?
No, I would say it really depends on the judge and the state and the issue. In other words, I've seen a lot of men say the courts are discriminating against us as men, as terms of parents and child support and stuff like that. And I've seen a lot of women say the courts are discriminating against us now, um, requiring us to be working full time, even though we've got a 3 and a 4 year old, requiring different things. And a lot of the disputes, like over parenting, it really, there's a lot of women who feel taken advantage of, and a lot of men who feel taken advantage of. And I've seen, because I've been in front of judges for 15 years, that by and large, they're pretty good at not being biased. But occasionally I get one that leans more towards moms or more towards dads. But I wouldn't say anymore that there's a generic discrimination or bias against men in family courts. Really depends on the judge and the case.
Very good. Thank you. Make sure you guys hit the like button on your way in. And also, if you have not responded to the poll, make sure that you respond to the poll. Who benefits more from marriage, men or women, or equal benefit? Do you think that there is and we talked about the happiness, but the benefits of it? Would you want your children to get married? Would you encourage marriage? And what would be the benefits besides the happiness and all that that you mentioned?
Well, in terms of stability for children, the research shows that children of married parents generally have a higher level of well-being, and the relationships last longer. I don't know where I saw this, but several years ago there was a statistic I saw that the average age of children when parents divorced was around 8, when married parents divorced, and when unmarried couples divorced or separated, it was around 4. And so it is longer, um, for children of married parents. So I would encourage that. And my belief is most people do want to be married, but sometimes for financial reasons, they feel like we can't do it yet.
Mm.
And sometimes that goes longer and longer. But I think it's worth aiming for, and people don't have to have expensive weddings to get married. They can have get married at the county courthouse and have a simple ceremony and spend a couple $100 and live happily ever after. So it's the commitment, I think, of marriage that gives it a little more glue, that helps hold people together and helps hold families and kids together.
Have you heard that people just want the ceremony and don't really want the marriage? You talk about the expensive weddings and all that. I mean, what are your thoughts about that?
I think there's probably some people like that. They like, I'm not sure about my partner, but it's going to be great. My friends are going to love the wedding. um, yeah, I think there's some people like that, but by and large, people take it seriously and want it to work. The irony to me is how much people spend on weddings now and don't pay attention to being prepared for making the marriage work. It's like you should spend some time, I think, on couples counseling beforehand. And churches do that, synagogues do that, secular couples, some get that. That you want to build some resilience in before you jump in. And I think that can also help make things last longer.
Nicole is saying thank you to you, Bill. So
Oh, good. I didn't say anything too offensive yet.
no, not yet. Anyway, I'll give you a chance for that in a minute. How long do you think that people should date before they get married? Do you see a correlation between that and a long-lasting relationship?
Yeah, I think at least a year. And the idea is, and some of the cases, in court cases, there's a percent that have domestic violence in them. More of it men against women, but some women against men. That often doesn't show up for several months in dating. And yet, usually by a year, you're going to know if that's an issue. And if you have a real controlling partner, um, then you want to find that out before you've made the commitment. When my business partner and I, Megan Hunter, and I wrote the book Dating Radar, we did an online survey, got about 300 responses of would you say you ended up in with a high conflict partner in your marriage? And if so, when did you realize that? And some people said the night of our wedding. Then the person said, guess what? Now I'm in charge. Now that you've committed, bird watching, I never wanted to do bird watching. I'm not going to do that again with you. And that there's a certain amount of once you really commit like that, then the real person comes out, the whole person. And that's why dating a year, you want that to happen before you make the marriage commitment, before you have kids, before you buy a house together.
There's this sentiment. I have a friend of mine. I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
No, that's it.
Okay. I have a friend who often says he's a counselor, and he often says, you got to see your partner angry before you commit to them in that way. Is that along the lines of what you're thinking there?
Yeah, you want to see them angry. You want to see them sad. You want to see them how they deal with friends in trouble. You want to see how they deal with their relatives. Some people won't let you meet their relatives. They say, "Oh, my relatives are terrible. They're jerks. They're like sociopaths. You don't want to meet them." And then when they get divorced, they find out the relatives could have tipped them off about some of this stuff. On the one hand. On the other hand, there's some people that maybe have a relationship with their mother or their father that's really toxic, and they really are happier to have a lot of distance from them. But I think you should meet the people around the person, meet family, meet friends, see how your potential partner interacts with people. That will tell you a lot. If you don't see that, then you're not finding out, like you said, that what the anger or the hurt, all that stuff.
Would you recommend that premarital counseling be mandatory?
I might. Yeah, I don't think it'll happen, but I think, and that's, as a therapist, when I would do individual counseling and someone's thinking of getting married, there's a lot that they don't think about, that they should. And so I think premarital counseling and helping them do that together, so they're really on the same page. And especially, like I said, sometimes people aren't clear whether they want kids or not. And then it's like, okay, we've been together for a year, let's start having kids. And so, I never was into that. I don't want that. And that's sometimes a reason people split up. So I think premarital counseling would make all this stuff a lot clearer and a lot easier.
How much communication is going on in these times? Because it seems like some of the stuff ought to be automatic, right? I mean, we got to talk about kids, we got to talk about religion, we got to talk about, chores, we got to talk about, how many times a night we want to, enjoy each other naked. I mean, we got to talk about this stuff. Is that not happening in your estimation?
That's absolutely right. That's the foundation. If it's going to work, it's going to work because there's good communication. And if it's not going to work, often there isn't good communication and nothing else really goes from there. So I'd say that's one of the most fundamental, if not the most fundamental skill to have and task to do. Let's get to know each other and see. And that's where if you date for a year, you're going to have all those conversations. And if you clear all those hurdles, hey, you've got a good launch, and you may really be like that. People say my grandparents, married a week after they met, and they've been together for 50 years and they're still happy. So, but now you've got to be a little more assessing your partner. There's more high conflict people out there, and we know less about people that we meet. So, especially online, they might not even be using their own photos. So there's a lot of stuff to be cautious about.
I've run into that, believe me. Speaking of that, let's deal with the bait and switch, right? You talked about, people who don't want to let you meet their parents, people who, as soon as they get to slide the wedding rings on, that, I never want to go line dancing or whatever, right? So, and, people who, give you a lot of sex before you get married, and after that, it all goes downhill, or they pretend to be thrifty, and then as soon as they get married, they start running up the credit cards. Talk about the bait and switch a little bit and how that goes.
Yeah, I think be aware that that's possible, that there's a percent of people today that are invested in deceiving other people about who they really are. I talk about high conflict people, and they often have a dual persona. There's the public person and there's the private person, and you want to find out the whole extent of the private person, even though you were attracted to the public person. So I think people need a healthy skepticism. Don't be paranoid, but check things out. Realize this is possible. Some people say Google your partner, find out what's out there about them that they're not telling you. And that's the benefit, I think, of meeting friends and meeting family. Even if family's terrible, meet them, let them find out for themselves. But seeing your partner in relation to other people will tell you a whole lot about who they are.
Yeah, very good, very good. Um, uh, Amafetello, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong there. Amafetello says, "What about prenups? Does that help, or what are your thoughts about that?"
That's a tough question. As a lawyer, I actually did some prenups. Um, it's really mixed because it kind of assumes that you're adversaries and that someday you're going to split up, and will there be spousal support? That's often one of the biggest issues. And people used to be waiving spousal support in their prenups. And I haven't done it for a long time, but I don't think you're allowed to do that very easily anymore. Um, it's, I'd say it's mixed. Is there a good reason for that? Now, one good reason may be a second marriage. Both people have kids and they want to preserve some of their estate, what they've built up, if anything, for their own kids. And in that regard, a prenup might really make sense. I think I don't always see it go well. I see some couples split up over a prenup. So, uh, and in a lot of cases, why are you doing this? To protect to have one person make a lot more money and the other not be part of it. Um, in California and 10 community property states, what you earn during the marriage is going to be community property mostly. So why do a prenup that changes that? Some people already have a business. Let's say a dentist has a dental practice and then they get married at 40 and they've built up, their success and they want to build on that without, giving it all away to the other party. But community property laws take that into account. So you can keep the value you've earned before marriage and keep that as kind of a nest egg, but still share earnings during the marriage. It's a community. Everything you each do should contribute. So I would say it's a mixed issue.
Very good. Very good. Um, because ladies are earning more, do you think that they have a less desire to get married and a less desire to have children?
I would say no to less desire to get married. I think women making every level of income would like to be married to somebody who's comparable to them, because of liking that companionship, etc. In terms of having children, it does seem to be having an effect that, and this is worldwide, that the more women have income, the less they have children. And this is a worldwide issue today because every country is starting to backslide in terms of having children, that the rate of children as childbirth is going down. And this is a real mixed bag because if your goal is to have an equal society where men and women have equal opportunities, equal resources, equal pay, um, then that means that men need to also want to raise kids. And so if that balance can work, it can be okay. But I think it is true that it does impact desire to have children.
All right, I have like one or two more questions. And I want to get to this bullying stuff here. So how do you recommend keeping the spark alive? How would you recommend that?
I think doing new things. And for me, I think travel is one of the best. And it's interesting that when people are in different environment who love each other, care about each other, it kind of stirs up some of that newness again. And so I think travel is one of the great things. Trying something new together. You've got to have interest together. And that's one of the things that's harder today. Find a hobby you both like, both take up pickleball or something like that, where you can both, challenge each other but get excited about this new thing. So I think travel, doing new things together, and that gets some of the juices flowing at the physical level as well. Um, we're made to last a long time, so let's keep things stimulated, and I think that's possible.
Um, let's see here. I was reading the chat here. Uh, do you notice a difference in religious couples or those who engage or don't engage in premarital sex? Do you think that engaging premarital sex ruins everything, or how does that factor in at all, if at all?
I think it really doesn't make a difference. One of the things that fascinates me is arranged marriages in other cultures, and that arranged marriage is still happening a little bit. Some people, I was consulting with a woman recently who said that her marriage was an arranged marriage like 10 years ago in her culture. And arranged marriages actually often do pretty well. So, and they don't have sex before marriage, or at least they're not supposed to. um, I would say sex before marriage or not is not a determining factor. Um, and a lot of people, that's part of getting to know each other. and what works. But I think couples that wait until marriage and couples that don't have probably pretty equal success rate. That it depends on a lot of other things.
Okay. Okay. The arranged marriage thing, the culture is so similar though, right? I mean, the religion is, you know, that's one thing because here in the US, my I can remember my grandfather being a Methodist, and my grandmother was a Baptist, right? And that was a big deal.
Mm,
And that was a big
mhm.
deal. Whether I assume most of them are most of those from arranged marriages are either Muslim or Hindu or something like that. So what it is. But if you meet
Right.
someone online and they're from Idaho and I'm in Connecticut, you might not, that's not going to work too well. I would assume.
Oh, well, that really depends. A lot of people agree whose church they're going to go to or whose religion, because you have, Christian and Jew marry each other, and they may say, okay, we're going to raise the children as Jewish kids or as Christian kids. That a lot of couples work that out, but that's sometimes also a divorce issue.
Mm.
So it depends on how powerful the difference is, and if they find a shared community or they don't. Um, yeah, I think, but the arranged marriage is right because I think of a couple. Well, I didn't work with the couple. I worked with the husband and did his divorce. He was from India. They got married in India. Their arranged marriage years ago, and they came to the United States and grew apart and ended up getting divorced. I think the loss of that total community environment
Mm.
made a difference. And the US culture is, of course, more individualized, although in India they're becoming more and more individualized as well. It's a mixed bag because I think religion helps hold people together, but some people it also traps in bad situations.
I was going to ask you how would they have been divorced if they were still living in India? There's
I don't know.
yeah.
That's a real good question. I think it may have and in India, you have your extended families are huge. I have a friend who married an Indian guy in the US, and they're getting along very happy. They've been together 10, 15 years. But their wedding in India was like 500 people came to that, and they were all related, I think. So they're very big on a large community, and I think that helps people to some extent.
Have you dealt with a lot of I'm going to say mixed couples?
I
Uh, and what I don't mean black and white. I mean someone's from India in the U.S. or from Brazil in the U.S. That's what I mean by mixed. Have you dealt with a lot of that?
I wouldn't say a lot, but some, and that certainly creates more pressure. I think of a young couple that I did a divorce mediation with. The woman was from Central America, and the man was from California, and they're both young, they're like 24, maybe something like that. And he met her on a vacation, had a great time, and he went back and forth for a year. Then they got married, and then she moved to the US. And then within a few months, they were starting to talk about divorce. I think that the cultural differences do play a pull. What's interesting to me is I've had more divorce mediations like that than I've had court cases because I think they want to do it peacefully. um, but yeah, I would say that is a pressure, and that those relationships have a harder time, especially if their language is different. They've got to learn each other's language, and sometimes that's too big a hurdle.
Do you think it's that, or do you think that people just really wanted the green card, or maybe a little bit both?
Well, I had one where it became clear that it was all about a green card. And my client was devastated. He was the husband. And when he realized that's really what she wanted, because she settled in and then pursued a divorce, and that it was clear she never really loved him, and yet he loved her. And he was quite devastated by that. And and so I helped him get divorced. I think she actually in that particular case was able to stay in the US, but that's a terrible reason to get married. Now, sometimes I know of a case where people plan to do that to help a friend, and so they got married and then they fell in love. So it could go
I have
either
heard of
way.
that. I've heard of that. I
Yeah.
used I used to be a police officer. I don't know if you know that, but I ran into couples like that. They met
Huh.
each other. It was just an arranged thing, and next thing you know, it was here where I'm at. There's a kind of a big Brazilian kind of a population. So some
Mm.
Brazilian ladies would come over and they really liked the guy and they didn't want to leave. It was
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so much depends on the individuals and the chemistry.
Okay, I think that's it for those questions. I want to get to the bullying stuff here.
Sure.
So you do some bullying work with high, what do you call them, what do you call them, high functioning,
High
high bully,
conflict people.
high conflict people.
Yeah. Yeah. So last year I wrote a book, Our New World of Adult Bullies, how to spot them, how to stop them, because it just seems to be a growing adult bullying, especially in the workplace, but also in domestic violence cases in couples. Also, in some cases, in communities where you have people threatening their neighbors or breaking things. We just seem to be seeing this, and especially online, that cyberbullying is a really big problem. And what's interesting, the research about like teenagers, is that cyberbullying, of course, is really escalated, but that the cyber bullies are the same people as bullies in person. That it isn't that everybody's becoming a cyber bully. It's the same percent of people who um, bully their fellow students in person and also do it online.
So
Yeah.
what's causing that? I mean, we used to. I mean, we did that all the time as kids. I mean, they didn't get out of their system. And what's up with that?
Well, I think that in many ways it's our high conflict people. Which are about 10% of adults. I'd say all kids try out bullying. I'm an older brother, my younger brother, I look back and think of some things I did that I'm ashamed of, kind of bullying him, but we got along pretty soon. Um, but I think everybody tries out bullying somebody as a kid at some point, but that 90% outgrow it. And most people don't really get going because they get punched in the face or, no one likes them and they learn bullying's not the way to go.
Mm.
But I'd say 90% of kids aren't don't grow up to be adult bullies, but about 10% do. And that 10% also were bullies when they were kids.
Mm. You think that Trump has caused any of that?
I think the cultural environment of which he's been a leader definitely has changed because of the idea that I can get what I want by bullying people. And there's an interesting quote I put in the front of. Let me see if I can quickly find this. My adult bullies book. I put this quote of a study. This was researched by the U.S. Workplace Bullying Institute. I don't know if people know that exists.
I didn't know that existed.
So they did a survey in 2021, right when the pandemic was peaking. Said 58% of respondents agreed that the display of bullying, disrespect, and intolerance of the opinions of others by politicians and public figures affected workplaces because they encouraged aggression and granted permission to ignore rules. So I think that answers your question.
I put the book up here if anybody wants to go over to Amazon or wherever they want to find it. Our New World of Adult Bullies.
And hopefully you notice on the cover there's that little fish that the bully's chasing,
Right.
but all of the other little fish get together and chase the bully, and the little fish gets away. So
Yeah.
that's the answer: is you need to get help usually, and that we're all bigger than the bully, and that's the way to go. So I got about 60 examples: family, workplace, community, even a few political examples, but I don't mention the person you just mentioned.
Okay. He who shall
I
not
don't
be
want to
named.
get bullied. I don't want to be bullied.
Yeah, well, yeah, you're right. And let me put your other book up here on the screen here. Uh, this is no, that's not it. Dating Radar.
That's a good
This is
one,
your
I
other
think.
book here. Dating Radar: Why Your Brain Says Yes to the One Who Will Make Your Life Hell. So, you guys
Yeah,
can go over there and check that out. You guys who are into dating and looking for somebody and all that. So. All right, so
yeah.
two last questions here. So, well, actually, just one last question because I was going to ask you, uh, how do we deal with bullies? But you gave us the example there in the little fish chasing the big fish. So I think that kind
A
of sums it
lot
up.
is getting help. Yeah. If people say if there's one thing to do, I would say talk to somebody about it. Don't carry it alone. Don't get isolated because bullies want to isolate you. And if there's one thing, talk to somebody, a friend, a coworker, a supervisor. And if the supervisor is bullying you, talk to somebody else in the chain of the hierarchy. So bullying isn't illegal in the United States. It is in some countries. Sexual harassment's illegal, and yet a lot of places have bullying policies, anti-bullying. So get help. There is help, and don't go it alone.
Uh, Actually, Monique M is asking a question. Do you see one race or group divorcing more than others?
Um, I would say no. I haven't seen any research on that. Um, Yeah, I think today's world, so much as individuals, really depends on the individuals in the marriage. But I'd say all races are fans of marriage, and they want it to work. So now the study I just mentioned, about 40% of women are very happily married
Mm.
with children, and 30% happily married without children. Um,
Those
I
are
don't
big.
know.
Those are big numbers, though. 30% without 30% are happy, but if they don't have children, I mean, that's
Wait,
still
25%. It's 40% married women with children are very happy.
very happy.
25% married women without children are very happy. Yeah. But I don't know about the racial breakdown. I don't know if they did that.
Those still don't seem to be very convincing numbers because those are happy. That means 50 to 60 to 70% are not happy, or are those just middle of the
No,
road? Just
they had four categories.
okay.
So two happy and two unhappy. And so that means 65% of married women are very happy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the other numbers, that means 35% are unhappy or very unhappy.
Okay. So
So
most people who are or who are married are some form of happy, whether with kids, without kids. So there's some
right,
form of happy. Okay.
right.
Very
Yeah.
good. Okay. Very good. So give us your best piece of advice, and I'll let you go. Thank you so much for coming here. Best piece of advice. People are dating, they want to get married. What would you say to do in this day and time to get married?
Get to know each other. And there's no replacement, there's no single question for that. Spend time together, do fun stuff, do tough stuff, have those tough conversations, get to know each other, and just do a variety of things to see what's this person like in a variety of situations. That's going to be what helps you the most.
Okay. Very good. And do you have a podcast or you have something else, right? Or
We do, yeah. So High Conflict Institute, if you want to find us, I do a lot of consultation. We have books, videos, articles, all that, highconflictinstitute.com. We have a podcast called It's All Your Fault, dealing with high conflict people. And we typically talk about a wide range of topics. And we talked about this one also when my article came out. Family, workplace, those are the two biggest places we see high conflict, but communities and the world. So what we're learning is this is a bigger problem than it used to be, but also we have a lot of answers. So check us out. And our podcast is quite popular. So it's all your fault. That's easy to remember.
And it's definitely so. And where's the podcast? Is it on YouTube or is it on like Spotify or
I think it's on a few places. I don't keep track of all that. I'm thinking Spotify at least. Yeah, if they come to our website, they can easily find it and see where it is. Yeah, I'll have to do that.
Okay. I definitely understand if you don't you just let somebody else do it. I get that.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to come to visit us today. I really appreciated I'm sure the chat was going crazy and all that. So I'll just give you the numbers of the breakdown. Right. So we had who benefits more from marriage, men, women, or equal benefit. 45% said equal benefit. 33% of those who voted said it was men. 21% said women. And we had 42 votes. If you have not hit the voting button, let me know. Yeah, and so what are my results in the poll? I was actually very much surprised and encouraged by this conversation to know that many more people are happy in marriage, and they think that it's an equal benefit. I think that's according to the poll here. I think that's very encouraging.
Yeah,
So
I was surprised and encouraged. So you're right.
Yeah.
There's a future.
There's a future. Yeah. Yeah. So I lied. We have a gender war that's going on. I don't know if you pay attention to any of that. How would you say that we end this gender war? I promise that's the last question.
I think we need to all learn skills of empathy and putting ourselves in the other person's shoes and talking directly to people of the other gender. Because talking online to ourselves just pulls people farther apart. And that's not just gender, politics, religion, everything. You talk to your own group, you'll pull farther apart. Talk to people in the other group, one to one, and that's where all the polarization diminishes. So talk to people.
Yes. A lot of people are saying thank you so much for coming on. You made this a great show. It's not me, it's you. So, all that.
Well,
All right,
thank
thank you.
you. I've really enjoyed this. This is great.
Oh, I'm glad.
Discussion.
I'll be looking for your stuff on Psychology Today, and if you hit something else, I'll try to have you back. So,
All right.
Okay, take care.
You too. Thanks a lot.
All right. All right, y'all. We're going to call it for tonight. Thank you so much for everyone for showing up. If you guys want to buy me some lunch, I would appreciate it. So I'll put the sticker up here. Where is it at? Hit the thumbs up. Make sure you guys hit the thumbs up and let me hold a couple of dollars. If you want to buy me some lunch, I would greatly appreciate it. Until next time, I will see you guys. Steph, you were late, so you got some push-ups to do here. So, all right, guys, take care.